We begin with breaking news about that strike at WestJet. Top executives from the airline are accusing the union representing aircraft maintenance engineers of operating in bad faith. The finger-pointing comes as the carrier cancels hundreds of flights and adjusts operations after nearly 700 employees walked off the job. Speaking at a media briefing last hour, WestJet's CEO says he's disappointed job action was taken and that an offer to make the aircraft maintenance workers the highest paid in the country was rejected.
There's one party that is currently acting very unreasonable, is calling for a strike that is doing nothing but damage, but is serving no purpose because there is no bargaining. And also a party that has rejected an offer that would have made our aircraft maintenance engineers the by far best paid in the country, with a more than 20% gap compared to the next best. And they say this is not enough. We don't want industry, they recognize it's industry leading. They said we don't want industry leading, we want industry changing. And that's obviously divorced from reality. That's not how bargaining works. And that's where the whole process broke down. And just as another reminder, the union doesn't seem to want to negotiate. A week ago, we had a first strike notice, and then they rescinded that strike notice after we agreed to have four additional days of bargaining. On the first day, after a few hours, while we were still negotiating, they issued the next strike notice, which just shows their only purpose was to disrupt as many Canadian travel as possible and actually not come to conclusion at the table.
The company says 235 flights have already been cancelled, disrupting the travel plans of 33,000 passengers. It adds 150 further cancellations will happen if there is no solution today. For more on this, we've reached Duncan Dee. He's a former Chief Operating Officer of Air Canada and an airline analyst. Listening to the CEO and the President of WestJet speaking this hour, many in this country, especially passengers, really trying to figure out where this sort of broke down. What's your sense of that after listening to that press conference?
Well, I think where this really broke down was the fact that both management and the union had actually come to a tentative agreement quite some time ago. And the union was unable to get that tentative agreement ratified by its membership. So it's extremely difficult for any management team to negotiate across the table with a bargaining committee that isn't attuned with what its membership wants. And so when you've got a situation like that, when you've tabled a industry-leading wage offer and you still can't get it across the finish line, it begs the question, what will? And so I think WestJet is dealing with an extremely difficult situation, an extremely difficult labor relations situation that really required ministerial intervention, which is what we saw on Thursday.
Okay, and when we talk about that intervention, there's been some back and forth about that because we heard the President and the CEO say because they entered into binding arbitration, there's no further bargaining to be done here. So what then is the union's logic in taking this strike action?
Well, I think that the union is trying to exert maximum pressure on not just management, but on the government. This is a weekend, the traditional kickoff of the summer travel peak weekend, when WestJet alone is carrying 250,000 Canadian, mostly families, on their summer vacation holidays. And so when you take a look at that situation and what the union is trying to do, you know, there's no more bargaining, as the CEO of WestJet has just confirmed. They're not at the bargaining table. There are no exchanges of collective agreement drafts going across the table for each other to review. So the only logical conclusion anyone can assume at this point is that the union is trying to exert pressure on, you know, the traveling public, the company, and also the Canadian government in terms of what can and should be done in the hours ahead, because we really are only talking about hours ahead before things get even more difficult for travelers in this country.
We've also heard the union say that WestJet was unwilling to negotiate. They referenced the order by the Industrial Relations Board, though, saying that it doesn't explicitly bar strikes or lockouts. So let's talk about that legal ambiguity and how that affects the union strategy and the airline's response here.
I mean, I think that the minister himself perhaps gave Canadians a clue as to what he intended when he referred the matter to the CIRB, where in his statement this morning, he talked about the fact that the CIRB's decision, which did not apparently bar a strike or lockout, was inconsistent with the request he made to the CIRB to take this matter over and refer it to binding arbitration. When you end up doing that, which is in itself quite unprecedented, what you're really signaling is you want labor peace. You want to protect the travelers from a weekend of disruption and heartache for many of these travelers who have had long planned vacations that are suddenly upended. And so when you have a situation where the minister has intended for labor peace, and labor peace actually is the last thing that seems to have happened, there has to be a reconnect of that disconnect so that we can get back to some semblance of normalcy in the situation that we find ourselves in today.
And those travelers, as you say, were told that everything was going to be fine, that there was not going to be any labor disruption, and now they're facing that reality. So what do you think travelers can expect now in terms of travel disruptions, just taking away from sort of the tenor of the press conference that we heard and some of the statements that we're hearing from the union? Does it seem like this is going to come to an end anytime soon? Is there redemption for travel plans now?
Look, I believe that the next few hours are going to be critical. The WestJet CEO and the president of the airline have basically said that once, if they do not hear what the minister really means when he said that he was going to study the CIRB decision, by early this afternoon Mountain Time, that WestJet, like frankly any airline in its facing the same predicament, will have to proceed with a wind down of their network. They are not able to proceed with their planned flying unless they can get some resolution to this. And that will mean even more disruption. And because this strike was a surprise, it happened without really any notice, the airline is dealing with a situation where they don't even have the luxury of a planned wind down in their operations. So, the chaos could continue well beyond the weekend into the weeks ahead. And so I think that the next few hours are going to be crucial for the federal government to make its views known as to whether or not this strike can proceed and whether or not WestJet will have the luxury of winding down its operations in an organized fashion or in a disorganized fashion, in which case, all bets are off.
Okay, well, we'll continue to follow this. Duncan Dee, thank you very much for your time today and helping us make sense of this developing story.
Thanks so much.
Passengers affected by the strike weren't happy to hear the news today, as we've been saying, especially as the strike is happening on a long weekend.
Oh, it would be a bummer for sure, because we haven't been on a vacation like this in 8 years, and it's our honeymoon. I just want it to get back on schedule and not have grounded flights for anybody traveling, us especially, but yeah, anybody who's going on a vacation. It's a hard thing to come by these days.
Earlier, we spoke with Gabor Lukács. He's the leader of the passenger rights advocacy group. He shared his thoughts on the WestJet strike and what options exist for those who are experiencing delays.
I'm not surprised whatsoever. Employees in every industry other than emergency services have the right to strike, and in this case, WestJet employees are exercising that legal right. It is unfortunate WestJet has been mishandling its labor relations so badly that it came to this point. Ultimately, employees are entitled to fair wages. From a passenger's perspective, WestJet is required, even under Canada's not so great passenger protection rules, to rebook passengers on its own network or competitors Depending on whether it can resolve the rebooking within 48 hours of the original departure time, then it can be its own network. But if it cannot, then WestJet will have to take out its corporate credit card and buy passengers tickets on flights of Air Canada or any other competitor if it cannot rebook the passenger on a flight that departs within 48 hours of the original departure time. That's the law. Money back is always an option. If you didn't get a flight you paid for, the airline has to give back your money. That's a no-brainer. The bigger question is how you can find alternate flights, because WestJet has a history of non-compliance with its legal obligations to rebook passengers and competitors. That's an ongoing problem. Unfortunately, the current government has been letting go without any real financial consequences. If you are a passenger in this situation, what I would recommend doing is giving WestJet one chance to comply with the law, and then just going out and buying a ticket yourself, and then making WestJet pay for it in small claims court, if you can find an expensive flight at all.
That was Gabor Lukács, leader of a passenger rights advocacy group.